we were on TriNet for a very long time. These guys are unbelievable. They took the whole burden of HR off our plate, and given what's going on right now, honestly, I miss them a little bit. On that note, our speaker, in the midst of a pandemic, human resources is more critical than ever to the organization and function of a business. There is a new normal, and managing the human cost and approaching it with humility and compassion becomes a priority. Catherine Ragg, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at TriNet, and my business partner, Tony Del Mercado, COO of Hawke Media, will sit down and discuss navigating your employees through a pandemic from an HR perspective. Super valuable stuff, guys. This is the real, like, gritty nuts and bolts of what you need to be doing now as business owners. And so would love to welcome both of you.
Thanks, Eric. How you doing, Catherine? Can you hear me?
Her mic's not working.
Catherine, can you hear me?
Oh, she's muted.
Oh, I think you're muted.
There
we go.
Perfect.
Hi.
All right, beautiful. I love it. You know, first virtual conference where we're getting things figured out here. It's pretty exciting. Well, we've got a ton of content. Thanks again for joining us. The first thing that I want to do is just quick mood check. How are you doing? How's TriNet? How's the team? How are you hanging in there?
Good. Thanks for asking. TriNet team is great, actually working hard. So that's actually awesome. I was a little panicked trying to get into this thing for some reason today, but it's all good. Normally you just click a button, but it's great. It's great. Everybody's good and, you know, working hard, and I'm excited to talk to you today. So thanks for having me.
You bet. Yeah, no, you bet. Let's get right to it. These are uncertain times, obviously. So how do you prepare your employees to handle change?
So HR professionals, our job is to support employees as we navigate through change, right? Or just the emotional cycles of change. And, you know, making sure, I think that the first thing that we do is make sure that colleagues know we have a plan. I say colleagues, employees, interchangeably. You know, I think giving them comfort that we have a plan and we can execute on our plan is half the battle. So that, and keeping them informed as we enter the change phase is also really important. We need to, as leaders, show empathy and support for one another. We have to assist our colleagues through the change process or manage through things that are unexpected, like COVID-19 is very unexpected, and things keep changing on a daily basis. So I think as HR folks, we need to be as flexible as possible so that we can adjust as the need arises. You know, things that may not have been important yesterday are now important today. And so we need to be flexible in having to reassess on those critical priorities as they come up all the time. And really it's communication, right? Communication, through, especially through these times, is I think just basic table stakes, if you will.
And how do you mobilize to quickly respond, react, and address different things during a time of crisis?
I mean, basically, you said sort of almost like a task team, or you know, many companies have a BCP team, if you will, business continuity team, that they would have already had assembled to set the direction and sort of the tone of what they need to what they need to do, how they are planning, making decisions, communication, things like that. So our team has created a small subset of whatever our executive leadership team is, and then members from across the different disciplines in the organization that are put together so that they can effectively and efficiently respond to the needs as they arise. I think the big thing for us is creating an environment where you have more directive leadership at times, because you've got to actually make decisions really quickly. You need to delegate that authority to make the decisions. You got to sort of remove the red tape. And it sounds sort of simple, but it's not in practice. Everybody likes to have a voice, but sometimes you've got to be able to get in and make decisions as soon as possible. And sometimes you're not perfect as you go through the process, but making sure you have the safety and well-being of your colleagues first and foremost is what's paramount in the process. For us, right before COVID was about to impact the US, we had a team. They were entering in daily task force calls that we would have, once a day. And then many of our sub teams would have multiple calls throughout the day, depending on what was happening, so that we could get enabled. So whether it was moving our workforce to all remote capability, or, now, which is the first time in TriNet's history that the majority of the workforce is actually working remotely. So that was a big milestone for us. And then making sure that you're keeping track of your various initiatives and decisions along the way, right? So God forbid you have to do this again, but in general, so that you're more prepared and aligned, and making sure that you're ensuring the stability of the workforce.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just taking note of the things that we're doing as we're going through them now, because disaster and downturn and the unpredictable is the most predictable thing, right? So
Yep,
documenting how we're getting through it that's a good point. I haven't thought about that. Obviously, we're here because of COVID-19. There's a lot of information going on. Traditional media, social media, employees of all ages are glued to this stuff. But they want to hear from company leadership and HR particularly. What's the role of HR in communicating about these things?
I think my personal opinion is HR has a big role in communicating to our colleagues. First and foremost, we adhere to, we in COVID-19 in particular, adhere to like the CDC and the WHO, right? They sort of set the baseline guidelines, and then there's different state and federal regulations that we need to manage. So that actually gives us sort of the groundwork. And then our role as HR professionals, and in particular in an HR organization, is to actually take it up another notch and figure out what are they worried about? What do they need to hear about? And how do we respond to what's on their mind with the right tone, the right sensitivity, and actually timely is one of the big things. So I think HR should be driving a lot of the communications, but not all of it. I think our leaders actually do play a significant role in whether it's reinforcing the communication that we put out there for their respective areas, and actually tailoring that communication to their specific areas, or their specific workforce, if you will, right? We have a wide variety of workers in our organization, as an example. And so different people need to hear different things at different times. So I also think it's an ever evolving process, right? And how people want to be communicated to. Sometimes it's email. We actually created an information center on our own intranet that folks could actually go as they need to go grab information from various different, it could be, job aids to, what do I do if somebody, got sick, or if somebody in my household is sick, or if I was exposed to something, or should I come to work, or et cetera, et cetera. So being able to have stuff that's accessible to them at all times is really helpful. We also use video communication, live conferences with employees. But so I think making sure you have all those channels available and getting stuff out real time to colleagues so that they feel connected when we're all kind of sitting back in our houses, or our homes or our apartments or what have you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think you referenced off the top, you're taking direction from the CDC and the WHO and state and federal, mandates or regulations and recommendations. I know our company is mostly, mid to late 20s, all the way up to, older than that. But I think that the proclivity of people to look on social media or look to the news media, the misinformation is rampant. The idea of an intranet or a centralized resource is really, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's confusing for folks because they hear from their relatives, they hear from others, depending on the communities that they live in. And because throughout the United States throughout the world, but throughout the United States, different, I'm in the Northeast as an example. I work in New York and New Jersey, all over, the impact here is different than in other states, right? So depending on where your colleagues are, it's always top of mind, but the reality is slightly different depending on your geolocation. Yeah. So it's helpful to bring it all to clarity, and so that they have at least a perspective or a company perspective that they know that they need to follow.
Yep. What advice would you give company leadership on managing a virtual workforce during these unprecedented times? You mentioned TriNet is for the first time predominantly remote. as are we at Hawke Media, as are obviously many, many, many businesses. So what do you say to the leaders out there doing this for the first time?
You know, it's communication. It's being managing with empathy and understanding. Really allowing folks to adapt to the environment that we have now, right? So being, I like to tell my folks, you know, managing with, you know, sort of authenticity. It makes a big difference, especially, you know, when you see somebody in the office and you're used to a different environment, and then you actually are now home, right? And you're home and you're, you know, anything from your, you know, I'm in my basement at the moment versus like somebody that might be, you know, in their hoodie or whatever. It's trying to create as much normalcy as possible, but understanding. I think from a leader perspective, you know, you've got so many folks. I think this is a unique time for our country, for the world. So many folks are working so hard and stepping up and trying to be creative and innovative about, you know, how do they actually get their work done. And I think as leaders, we need to actually be open as well. As an example, if you've got two working people in your family or in your household rather, and you've got young children and or you know somebody that needs care, allowing folks to try to flex their schedules so that they can cover, so that they can keep their careers and keep working, but also being able to take care of what's in the home that you know they maybe used to have outside assistance and they don't have that any longer. So I really think just trying to build that culture of resiliency is really important as we go through that process.
Yeah, you spoke about, you know, being on calls and some people have a hoodie on or, you know, there's other distractions. I know that my, both my 5 and my 2.5-year-old sons have been on my lap for a number of different meetings and calls. And it's nice to see how people are accommodating and sort of acclimating to this new normal, but making that okay for leadership to understand is a big part of it.
Absolutely. And I think as leaders, yeah, you have to actually demonstrate it, right? If you're kind of in your box and you're making your folks kind of feel like, well, how's Tony doing it, but I can't do it, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's allowing them to know you're human, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
absolutely. I've seen more of our team's, you know, bedrooms and pajama pants and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty interesting. But hey, as long as the job's getting done, we're all just trying to do the best we can.
absolutely.
What are some of the resources or tools that companies should be looking at or considering now that it is an entirely virtual workforce?
So, I mean, I think, I mean, so, I mean, you could talk, I guess, like everything from a tactical level to, you know, we're using Zoom here to Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, making sure that companies have abilities to actually get the visual aspect of colleagues so you can bridge the distance, I think is important. I think, you know, being able to, you know, anything from, I mean, for us, it's, you know, we actually created virtual onboarding processes where we can actually do, you know, you do your I-9s or your welcome kits or, you know, changing your onboarding process to allow folks to feel connected because we haven't stopped hiring. So how do you actually bring people in when you maybe haven't even interviewed them in person, you're only interviewing them virtually. So you try to bring them into the fold in as much of an authentic way as possible. Our company tend to be all laptop driven. I think many companies are, but there are a whole host out there that aren't. So allowing them to be able to flip very quickly, or even some companies are, you know, if they've got the proper security and privacy rules, to bring your own and use their own laptops. I've seen companies onboard folks using their own laptops because they weren't able to deploy new ones. So we have even actually, if you can believe, there are folks out there that don't have Wi-Fi connections. And so we actually would help reach out and get them their connections that they need so that they can actually enable them to work remotely. And that's on a very tactical level. But I think, you know, it really just being able to kind of support them in whatever way is possible to create that sense of, okay, even if you're at home or wherever you are, that you can actually work and at least get the majority of your tasks done is great.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're hiring, you're onboarding. You use your, I presume you use your learning management program and sort of onboarding tools that are TriNet baked, or do you use third parties for some of that kind of like digital onboarding?
No, we've created a lot of our own within TriNet. So we actually have our own process that that we use. So we have our own tools. We also have partner companies that we utilize as well, but most of them are customized for TriNet and for our clients. So we absolutely do that. And yeah, it actually works really well. I think we have done a tremendous job, in particular on the client side, of creating resources for all the SMB communities. So similar to what we've done on the inside, we've done on a much larger scale on the outside, in being able to provide resources to the SMBs out there, whether they're clients or not, whether it's, you know, Families First Act or a CARES Act or other things, and how to actually navigate that world today.
Yeah, that's super important. I'll tell you, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, about a week and a half ago, one of the people on our team kind of posted in our general Slack that they had gone in and actually grabbed their office chair and brought it home because it was such a game changer compared to what they were working with at their kitchen table or whatever. You know, just all these things you don't necessarily think about. And I've seen some companies.
No. And as it extends, actually, the ergonomic aspect of things becomes more complicated, right? Because there's all kinds of accommodations that, you know, a lot of your colleagues may have had before, and trying to replicate them at home becomes challenging for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, you started to touch on kind of the cultural aspect, and what is the role of culture, you know, in bringing people together, and how do you maintain a culture at large, as well as a culture of resiliency during what's obviously kind of a challenging time?
Yeah, so culture is important, right? Every company is slightly different in how they define their culture. So the personality of the company is important, because, you know, whether you're in the office or you're not, you want to feel connected to the kind of the core values that are part of your DNA. And the more a colleague or an employee feels a part of the culture, the more likely they'll actually stay productive, and feel connected to the sort of the epicenter of what's going on. So I think crisis situations have a way of you know, sort of recalibrating what your culture is, right? People sort of rise to the challenge, and they sort of, you know, they recalibrate based on where they are. And I think sort of folks' true colors come out, and where they, you know, you know, folks at all different levels are working super hard. And so I think everything about creating flexibility, you know, again, opening to new ways of working, leading with courage, compassion, giving individuals at all levels an opportunity to add value, is important. And resiliency is interesting, because I think the ability for companies to bounce back after situations like these, you know, whether it's on an individual level, departmental level, or a company level, is the ability to sort of recover and adapt to the change that's out there is so important. And I think for us, like TriNet, I think is an incredibly flexible and nimble company, right? We were able to change really quickly to be able to lead through, you know, sort of these, I don't like to use the word unprecedented times, but they are somewhat unprecedented. You know, I think just making sure that you have that connective tissue that brings your folks together, so they really know what's going on at any given moment, right? Knowledge is comfort. So understanding what you can and cannot say, and actually just being able to actually deliver whatever you can say, or saying, I'll get back to you when you don't know something, is okay during these times. But I think it just creates that transparency, going to the core values, and the fit within the organization is all super important, especially at a time of crisis, if you will.
Yeah, you mentioned the core values, and what a great opportunity, if you can look at the silver lining, to sort of reaffirm or reassess your core values and how well you're living up to those during this time, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we're doing well over here.
Good. And, well, how are you having fun? Because we obviously, as Eric mentioned at the top, we worked with TriNet before, know tons of people over there. Like, how are you maintaining fun and that togetherness, not just the resiliency?
Yeah, I mean, lots of ways, actually. I mean, so we have a recognition, like we do thank you and recognition videos. We have an appreciation hub that we use for colleagues. I've seen folks on my team actually use TikTok to send motivating messages to the team, just to, like, change the monotony of the day, if you will. I've even seen some of the teams actually do, Friday, end of week opportunities to do, whether it's like virtual cocktails or virtual soda, so that they can just get in and sort of not talk about work, but just get together. We even have a team that, on a more creative level, has taken that to another notch, and they actually do virtual tours. They get to have one person in the team actually pick a virtual place that they want to go to, whether it's a museum or a national park or a museum, and they actually get online and they spend a half an hour going through it. So it just gets them to connect. And again, it's that connective tissue and that culture that I think brings people together in a significant way. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we've done similar things, virtual brunch and virtual happy hour.
Yep.
And
Yep.
one of our teams was on Jackbox Games the other day, doing
Yep.
some like quiz show kind of things. I think that stuff matters, at this time.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what assurances need to come from HR, or what assurances does HR need to provide to employees, to colleagues, so they feel safe to return once this thing is over? We haven't talked a lot about when the shelter-in-place order is lifted. What kind of cadence or what kind of communication happens then?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we have to, we'll see as things go. I mean, I guess, so we do have some folks that can, very small select group of folks that are working in certain critical roles in the office. So making sure that basic supplies are in our offices, making sure that our offices are cleaned at a more regular pace and at a deeper level, I think is important. Making sure that we have supplies, meaning if we need extra sanitizer and other things that are in our offices, that those are all there for folks. I think as we find out more as we go along, we will make sure that we can create sort of social distancing in the offices as needed to maintain a certain level of discipline that I think has been now sort of created through this process. And, making sure that we give, we have resources like EAP and our health plans and whatnot that all provide different resources when our folks have questions and concerns. But I think it'll be interesting to see when we're all ready to go back officially full time. I would imagine it will be over time. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a flip the switch. I would imagine we'll sort of pepper it in slowly as we get back to, a new normal, if you will.
Yep. Yeah, and there will definitely be some lessons learned from, both big and small companies as we get back to the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think HR leaders and business leaders need to focus on right now?
Yeah, I think it's listening to their colleagues and sort of watching what they've demonstrated over the past month or so. And as we continue through the process, I think really listening, learning. I think allowing people to be, it just depends on where they are, but bringing their authentic selves, being more individualistic because they're getting the work done. They're working super hard, and we need to recognize that sometimes we can be more flexible than maybe we have been in the past, if you will, right? Because our folks are actually demonstrating, in my opinion, I think folks really want to be at work. It's always interesting, right? The whole, I want to be remote worker, I want to work from home. And now that we're actually quarantined, everybody's like, get me out of here. I want to go back to the office. So I think just being open in that process is going to be really necessary in the future. And being prepared, and thinking about all that we have learned going through this process. Because as much as, everybody was prepared and we had pandemic plans in place and whatnot, there's a lot of new for everybody going through this process. And so just making sure that we've really learned. One of the things that we're definitely preparing for the future is like internal mobility skills assessment, right? So we have, just under 3,000 employees, but how can they actually fill different roles as across the country, across the different departments as we understand the new normal, or, we have shifts in work that need to be dealt with internally, which gives us a lot of leverage, I think.
Yeah, so you started to talk about plans for the future. What are the plans for the future? How do businesses, prep for the future? What are the things that we should all be paying attention to right now that might pay dividends in 6, 9, 18 months?
Yeah, I think so. Having whether it's like a team dedicated to sort of crisis response or just business resilience plans, I think is important. If you don't already have that, having the right tools, continue to scenario plan for the future. So if there's things that we didn't plan for this time, what should we plan for next time? Because I think there's always new things that were brought up that, maybe we could actually fix that or change that and whatnot. So to make sure we don't wait till tomorrow and that we get that on the list, to make sure that we deal with that sooner rather than later. And just making sure that, we keep an agile mindset, for our ways of working in the future, and make sure that we're not rigid in our approach, so that we can make sure that we're dealing and taking care of our colleagues the best we can. If we don't have our colleagues healthy and productive, we don't have our business. And if we don't have our business, we don't have our clients.
Yeah, true story. One of the folks on our team is always talking about how happy people yields pretty much everything that happens after that. So making sure they're taken care of. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what would you expect are the biggest changes that you're going to see across organizations, large and small, in the next few months?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think you'll see people being more flexible. I think you'll see people reevaluating what their real estate footprint looks like and sort of how they actually go about work. I think you'll see people being slightly more cognizant of how they work, sort of whether it's tightly packed or a little bit more space. I think you'll see people I think you'll see really interesting bonds with folks that actually go through situations like this, right? Like, I think people come together in unique and interesting ways, and it's unfortunate that this is how, but I think that you'll see really great bonds. And I think you'll see a lot of creativity and innovation coming out of stuff like this, is my prediction.
Yeah, it all sounds reasonable to me. And I don't know about your experience, but I've found I feel more connected in some ways to the organization and some of the contributors at large than I did when we were all in the same office, because we're all sort of used to our working patterns and sort of the same group of people that we communicate with on a daily.
Absolutely.
This has really opened that up. For me anyway, as a business leader, it's been super enlightening to have so many of these one-on-one conversations, and it's so easy to just ping someone and put a face to the conversation. I'm really excited to see what that looks like in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree for sure.
Last one, and then we're going to take our Q&A to the Slack channel, which for everybody listening is going to be the hashtag partnership-community. If you want to learn about TriNet or anything that Catherine's up to, or ask some more questions around what this is all going to look like from a really sound HR perspective, please do so. And I'll remind again before we wrap, but for folks like myself and, Eric and a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, we're sort of used to picking a date and just willing things into existence and having a sense of control. For business leaders that are now handcuffed or out of control, pretty much at the whims of forces greater than our own, how do we cope with that from a psychological perspective, from a practical perspective? What's the way to go about that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, and to be honest, it's not even a leader question, right? Because I think colleagues and employees at all levels want to know, when can I go back? When's normal? So whether it's, having family events or getting into the office, I think we need to watch and wait and see what the CDC says. I think we need to see what the local leaders are, like the local orders, the states are going to say. And then I think slowly over time we'll go back. But I think, I guess my advice would be, we have to be patient and do what's right for our folks to make sure that we stop this curve from rising and make sure it flattens. And we're just going to have to be patient. I don't have a crystal ball on that one, but it'll take some time. We just have to be patient and continue our focus to the best way we can.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the time. As I mentioned again, I'll just repeat it so everybody knows. Jump into the Slack and do hashtag partnership-community. That's where both Catherine and I are going to hang out for a little bit, answering questions about this kind of stuff. And again, if you're curious about TriNet and their services, as Eric mentioned off the top, we love TriNet, big fans, used them for a long time. And so thanks a ton for your time, Catherine. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. And stay safe. Be well.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
Bye.
All right.